Welcome back to TinyBlueGames. My name's of course Csaw or Chris, and today we're talking about Guild Wars 2 in 2021. Now, I recently did a video at the start of 2021 where I highlighted the most popular MMOs in 2021. And a lot of these games were the big ones that you would expect, like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, Elder Scrolls Online, yada yada yada. You can watch the video if you haven't seen it, but one of the surprising things was that Guild Wars 2 didn't make the top 5 coming out of 2020. And in this video, I wanted to look at why that is in more detail, and why I think 2021 could be a really big year for Guild Wars 2 moving forward. Now, just before we get into the nitty-gritty, I should mention I am a Guild Wars 2 or Arenanet partner. Does this mean I won't say anything bad about Guild Wars 2? No, as you'll see at the start of this video, I will say the good, I will say the bad. It's just important for you to know that. You should also note that there are 2 links in the description. They are sponsored links, and if you use them, they will support the channel. You can use them to either try out the game for free or to purchase the expansions. All that said, let's jump into the video. So I'm, as I've kind of alluded to, going to be saying a few negative things about Guild Wars 2 at the start of this video. I've kind of structured it this way. We're going to look at how Guild Wars 2 is doing right now. We're going to look at how things are going to look this year, and how I think the game could really progress going into the future. But yeah, so keep all of this in mind while I do this first section. Keep in mind that there is an expansion coming out later this year, and that's going to change a lot of the opinions I have right now. All that said, things aren't great right now. The content that's coming out is kind of stale, it's not very substantial, and it's not inspiring me as a player to log in much more than kind of wants to do the story and see what's up and then just kind of chill and wait. And I know a lot of people, you know, kind of on the fringe of Guild Wars 2 have been playing that way for quite some time, and that's completely fine, but for sure as a game point of view, they really want people to be more invested in the day-to-day gameplay than they currently are. And what's going on in the game right now is we have the end of the Icebrood saga, which you would hope that the end of a chapter of the game is kind of ramping up in interest and getting more exciting for people. And I'd almost say it's kind of been the reverse. I was way more interested in what the Icebrood saga was going to be at the start when it was first announced, because they were kind of treating it like, oh, maybe we will go back to Living World and not do expansions, and it's going to be just as good as an expansion, which, let's be honest, no one really ever believes. But yeah, the hype was kind of there for a little bit, and then it died fairly quickly. They had a few releases that had some interesting content and some new maps and stuff like that, but it's certainly gone down in the last few ones, just with content that's less exciting to do and kind of reusing different areas and stuff like that. It hasn't really been inspiring. And that doesn't even get into the point that, you know, a lot of the other forms of content outside of the open world and story haven't seen a ton either. Yes, we've had the odd fractal added. Yes, we've had the odd thing in PvP, but there's a lot of gameplay and different game modes that just don't see a ton of love. And that's a reoccurring theme in Guild Wars 2. And I'm not going to linger on that too much, but I think there's a few things that happened here. Number one, I definitely think, and this has happened before for Guild Wars 2, they changed their plan midway through the plan. They were like, hey, we're going to do Living World for sure, and this time we're not going to do expansions, we're going to make the Living World feel like an expansion. Halfway through it, they were like, oh, this isn't working, we need an expansion, and they had to scrap some of their plans for the Living World and focus on this new expansion. Now, this is complete speculation. I have no insider knowledge on this. I have no idea. That's just how it feels. Now, the one really good thing, because it sounds like I've been very negative so far, and I've tried to emphasize that I will be positive later on in the video, but the one good thing is I think that they've made the choice to go to the expansion, and I think that was the right choice. I think they should have kept with the expansion theme. They should have done the exact same plan they did from Hot to Path of Fire and just kept doing that, because that seemed to be such a good way to treat expansions. Was there an occasional content drought of some sort? Yes, there was. If they continued doing it and improved their processes of like how much they have to work on each piece of the game and how long it takes an expansion to get delivered, I think if they kept doing that, the droughts would become very minimal and we'd have more of a system like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, where there is an expansion ready, let's say every 2 years, and you very much know what to expect from it. So I was hoping that's where they'd go, but they did kind of revert back to their old philosophy of trying to focus on the living world and live in this fantasy of sorts that the living world would be enough content for everything. That's just what it feels like. Who knows if that was the case? But let's move past that little bubble of where we are now and talk about why I think 2021, the new expansion, and everything else that could come to the game is really hopeful for Guild Wars 2 overall. And I'll start for me with what's the most obvious point. The expansions in Guild Wars 2 have both been very enjoyable. Very different reasons for why I've enjoyed them. Heart of Thorns, I super enjoyed the raid scene. The first 3 wings of the raid that were released were some of the most amazing memories I have of Guild Wars 2, of progressing through it. And then for Path of Fire, the zones, the story, and just the overall exploration of the game was some of the best exploration and story I've ever experienced in an MMO. And now, yes, you can dislike certain characters, you can dislike certain turns the story took, but I think the way the story was presented, in terms of voice acting, in terms of visuals and areas you went and like discovered, the themes, like the grander themes of your character experiencing death. I'm sorry for spoilers, but it's been out for a while now, or experiencing the gods were quite grand, and I think it really made the story feel epic, and I think they did that super well. Now, if they combined the 2 best parts of those expansions and made one expansion that had both of those, we'd be sitting pretty, but that's probably not going to happen, and that's fine for me. The other big thing to remember is the big change that new elite specs for each of the classes brings to the game. That's a whole breath of fresh air that every single player is going to get impacted by, and more importantly, that every single type of gameplay in the game gets impacted by without even big changes coming to the game modes. For instance, you have these new specs added, they're going to impact the old raids that people are doing, they're going to impact the old fractals that people are doing, and they're even going to cross over into the different types of PvP. So in terms of bang for your buck, adding these new elite specializations is one of the best ways for Arenanet to breathe fresh air into older content, especially if they're not able to create enough content. Maybe there's not enough people playing them or something like that. Talking at you, raids, but sort of to bring that new form of life into it, which really leads us to the big question of this entire video. What is End of Dragons, the 3rd expansion coming to Guild Wars 2, going to add to the game? Well, there's a few different things we can look at, but I think it's fair to say that there will be elite specializations. They have been in the past 2 expansions, and they've been probably one of the more exciting parts of an expansion. I believe we'll get new zones. I think it would be fair to say that as well. They seem to be very good at creating new maps in terms of workflows. That seems to be something that's their bread and butter. And the expansion, the 2nd expansion, Path of Fire, had some of the best zones for exploration in the game. The 3rd thing that I think is a guarantee is something new, some sort of new feature to the game. And what I mean by that is in the 1st expansion, we had masteries, but more importantly, it brought things like gliding and stuff like that that really gave a new way of engaging with the world, our surroundings, specifically in the jungle, but it did sort of impact the entire rest of the game as well. And then in Path of Fire, we got mounts, which let us mount up in the desert, but also let us engage with different older maps and content as well. So I think it's fair to say that those kind of features that impact so many different game modes are going to be something that they try to target. What they choose to do is up in the air, and there's a lot of different things they could choose. A lot of people think that something to do with the water could be quite interesting. We have seen certain changes to how things interact with water in the past bit. For instance, the skimmer being able to go underwater and stuff like that. So the water's kind of in their mind, and in terms of story implications, there's a bit of reason why water could be interesting as well. We do know the zone that we're going to, just based on the themes of the expansion that has been announced. That's not much of a mystery, but the feature itself is still up in the air. Maybe it'll be sailing, maybe it'll be some sort of way to interact with the water that we haven't seen before or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see what that is. But I think it's fair to say that those three things, the elite specializations, the new maps and zones, and a grand new feature will come. And then the fourth thing that I think is not even really worth mentioning, because it's kind of pretty obvious, is that there'll be a new story that kicks it all off. I mean, you need kind of a story, a narrative to really explain why you're going to all these places, or else it doesn't make a ton of sense in itself. The final point to this is, why would this third expansion change things around for Guild Wars 2? And I kind of alluded this at the start, but I feel, and I hope, I have no insider information about this, I hope that at this point they've gone back and forth about expansions and just doing the living world enough that they're gonna say, let's do an expansion. If it works out like it did the last time, they'll just keep the course and let people know that that's the plan for the foreseeable future. Because that's really, I think, what's missing for the long-term survival of Guild Wars 2, is that consistent plan. And I've said that in so many videos. People who are regulars to this channel are probably tired of me saying this point, but when you compare Guild Wars 2 to all of the other big MMOs, the main thing that they're missing, and you can argue like there's different features and stuff that might be missing for you, or there's features they do better, but the main thing they're missing is a solid plan that you know to how to expect the content to be delivered. And to a degree, they actually have a very solid plan, because you know that every 3 months-ish they plan to do a living world update, and that's fair. The bigger plan, though, of if content is going to come in the form of expansions, or if there will not be any future expansions, keeps getting turned off and on. And if they could just consistently say, every 2 years, we are going to try and do an expansion. Yes, you can, shift the dates around a bit. I don't need to know exactly the date that it's going to happen in, 2023 or whatever. But if you can say that, that's our game plan, that's the goal. We're going to do expansions every 2 years, and in between that, we're going to have a living world update every 3 months. The amount of retention I think they'd get from players who want to focus Guild Wars 2 and make it their primary MMO would skyrocket. And certainly for people like me who like to play lots of MMOs, my interest and just continuation of the game would go up even more. Yes, there might be the odd living world chapter that comes out that doesn't tickle my fancy. I just go in and do the story, unlock it, that's it. But the overall continued interest in the game is going to be a lot higher. Because to compare, before we knew this third expansion was coming out, my interest in Guild Wars 2 as a whole was dwindling a little bit. But now, just even knowing that there is an expansion on the horizon, I'm able to be very hopeful for what the game's going to introduce, because I want to see what the new elite specs are going to be, I want to see what the new features are going to be, I want to see what the new maps are going to be. But yeah, guys, that's my thought on Guild Wars 2. I think 2021 is going to be a really big year for Guild Wars 2, and hopefully, if it's pulled off well, if they have good long-term planning, we'll see them grow to be one of the top 5 MMOs going into 2022. But yeah, share your thoughts in the comments below. Is there anything you'd like to see changed in the game? Is there some other reason that you are either really excited for Guild Wars 2 in 2021 or that you're not excited? I'd love to hear about it. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.